But the thing we can't get away from is that people still buy from people. And at the end of the day, humans, by their very nature, are emotional beings. And what I would say to anybody who's putting a methodology in place is you need to architect the methodology for your organization. Do I need to go through every single stage of MedPick for a 5K deal? Or am I over-engineering things and overcomplicating it?
If I see someone doing something wrong, it's like, oh, stop, I want to jump in.
If you never allow them to make mistakes, they're never going to learn. My dad always used to say, the only way you learn is by banging your head against a wall. The people who want to be great in their discipline, they don't practice until they get it right. They practice until they never get it wrong.
Let's do this, Lou.
Let's do it.
I feel like you're, are you nervous or you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm worried that I'm going to need a defibrillator later on, but anyway, it's going to be all right.
What part
It'll be good.
What part you nervous about the most?
Making it through it in one piece. No, I think it's going to be fine.
No.
I'm actually really looking forward to it.
What sort of exercise do you do at the moment then?
Actually, most of what I do is more sort of cardio, so things like this on a sort of static bike and then elliptical. So I try and do that most days if I can.
Yeah.
Get at least half an hour in, try to get an hour in. But other than that, it tends to be more sports that I'm doing outdoors.
All right.
So for me now, the biggest thing is sort of still a bit of cycling. And then when I get the opportunity, a bit of sailing.
So you still get out on a boat?
Occasionally, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you told me you had a sailing background and skiing, very different. We've had rugby, we've had CrossFit,
Yeah.
we've had athletics, and we've had cricket.
Okay.
Sailing's the first one. So.
No, sailing's great. I got into it at a very early age, actually. At the time, a very good friend of mine, his dad bought a windsurfing board. And then we used to go to a disused quarry near Sevenoaks.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it. It's great.
And then skiing, is that just from family holidays?
No, not at all. When you get into sailing, what you realise is that everybody's around for the summer and then disappear in the winter. And it's like, where have they gone?
Yeah.
And they were all generally going to the Alps and skiing, so followed along.
Yeah. I've never been skiing.
Oh, it's fab.
It's something I want to do. I was going to start doing a bit of skiing lessons this year. What made you go down the route of going abroad and coaching skiing and sailing?
Basically, it was more by accident than anything else. So I'd been working at NatWest for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And we had a massive recession. This would have been sort of 93, 94 time frame. So this was when Norman Lamont was the Chancellor. Interest rates were 15, 16% in the UK. So you think it's bad now? Not a patch.
Sorry, what year was this?
93, 94. And at the bank, they were having not a great time. So they offered everybody voluntary redundancies. And I took the opportunity to basically go out there. The idea was I was going to weather it for 6 months and enjoy some skiing.
Yeah.
I ended out there for the best part of 7.5, 8 years. So that didn't quite go according to plan.
So you used to do winters skiing, and then you was in Turkey, wasn't it?
I did Turkey, I did Corsica, I did the Isle of Wight, a bit glamorous. But yeah, basically in the Med a lot.
Yeah.
Sailing, which was fantastic.
One of the roles that you had, this made me laugh, when you first went skiing, right, was an EPH.
Yes.
Tell everybody what EPH stands for.
Right, an EPH is an extra pair of hands, right? So if there is a proper shit job to do, you're doing it.
Give me some examples of some of the shit jobs you did.
Unblocking toilets, that was particularly glamorous. You know, dealing with a lot of waste, sick, that kind of stuff.
Man.
It was all good fun.
Literally just an extra pair of hands.
Character building.
Well, yeah, fast forward from being an extra pair of hands,
Yeah,
you ended up in tech.
I did.
And you obviously have had multiple roles since then. And we'll get into some of the experiences you've had, what you've learned. But how do you think the tech industry's changed from, I mean, what year did you get into? What was your first role in tech sales?
Would have been around about 2005.
So how's the industry changed since then?
A lot, actually. So at the time I was working for, well, I was working for a marketing agency because my background is actually marketing, not sales. And we got bought by a US tech company, Axiom. and they had like a marketing services play and a platform. So having done that, I then got into the selling side of things, became an IC.
Yeah.
And selling into marketers was kind of second nature, having been a marketer myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. I mean, in terms of the industry then, so from when you got into it then, in terms of the sales team structure back then compared to now?
So it was a lot less complicated. There were a lot fewer players in the space.
Yeah.
So the competitive intensity was nothing like it is now. And it's kind of interesting. If I look back, there's a guy called Scott Brinker, and in 2011 he published the Chief Martech Marketing Landscape. And
I've seen this.
yeah, it's a big graphic.
Yeah, I've seen this, yeah.
In 2011, there were probably 150, 200 different technologies out there. And Scott himself will say that he probably missed a big chunk. Fast forward to last year, or actually this year, that same chart now has about 14,000 different technologies on
I
there.
downloaded it not too long ago.
Yeah. Now, whilst the market for marketing technologies has gotten larger, hasn't got 100 times larger. And that, I think, is part of the challenge, because points of differentiation between different offerings, they're not really that prevalent. And the main reason that is because anybody can spin up an environment at relatively low cost and produce a platform.
Yeah.
But what you then have a problem with is that once you've got that platform, you've then got to sell it. And when you're selling it, and you're competing against all these other companies, that then becomes difficult. So your cost of sale goes up because there's more competitive intensity, and your returns go down because there's more competition, so it starts becoming more price driven. And that, I think, is one of the challenges, not just in MarTech, but in every category of SaaS that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I've seen a number of charts like that, the MarTech one, I've seen a cybersecurity one, I've seen one for business operation software, and there's so many organizations. Me as a recruiter, I think you start rubbing your hands, but there's almost sometimes too much to go after. Yeah. I think for us now, we're trying to stay a bit more niched in certain areas, so no, it's interesting to see how things have changed since then. You want to jump off and we'll go look at the workout for today?
Cool.
You warm?
Yeah.
We'll head over. So just we've got the workout. Today is going to be the first time we're doing just an upper body workout, which actually suits me because my legs are sore from yesterday. So what we're going to do is, when's the last time you did weightlifting? What do you think?
Too long ago to remember.
So we'll do bench press, we'll do a 1-arm row, we'll do a shoulder press, we'll do a bicep curls, then we'll also finish on the assault bike at the end.
Sure.
To do get a bit of sweat on at the end.
What do you got to sweat on?
Might get worse.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll start off with the bench press, and then we'll get cracking on. So one of the things we spoke about, Louis, before, is how you love the psychology of sales.
Yeah.
What is it that you like so much, or what topics of psychology of sales interest you the most?
I think it's more about the human condition, right? And one of the things that I've seen in sales over the last 2 decades is that there's a lot more technology that's gone into sales. You know, whether that's things like conversational intelligence, whether it's things like revenue intelligence, whether it's things like engagement platforms, those kind of things. So there's a lot of tech that's going into it all the time. The thing we can't get away from is that people still buy from people. And at the end of the day, humans, by their very nature, are emotional beings. And there's a great, I'm sure you've seen the original Simon Sinek talk that there was, Start With Why.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says in it is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he makes the point about people making decisions with their limbic brains, so the back brain, way before they've actually made a logical decision about something. So if I meet you and I like you, and I get on with you and I start trusting you, I've made a decision that I want to buy from you, and then I'll go and find the data to reinforce the decision I've already made positively in favor of you. Likewise, if I don't do that, even if the overwhelming evidence says that this is probably the best solution, I still won't want to buy from you. So personal connections are super important, and making those connections and understanding the ambitions, the fears, the motivations, the objectives that people as individuals have, I think just helps you sell better. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of this stuff, again, we'll probably talk about this later, but there's so much research that's been done on this subject that people say, yeah, I have an opinion about X or Y or Z. Opinions are to a penny. What does the data tell you? And the data tells you that pretty much all decisions start off with a psychological affirmation before the business case, before the CFO gets involved, before procurement gets involved.
Yeah.
But this is how we build champions in organizations. And champions not just in terms of user bases or people that might be saying, actually, we really want to have this, but even within the economic buyer community, people buy from people.
Yeah.
And that's what fascinates me. It's that psychology of how you sell to people.
Yeah. So you don't feel AI is going to take over
Not anytime soon.
people anytime soon just because of that reason? Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there's a great place for AI, and we may talk about this later on, because I think it does make people's lives easier, and it does free up more time. And let's face it, the one resource we have in sales that we're not getting any more of is time. So if you've got more time, how are you going to spend that time? Ideally in front of people.
Yeah. Again, people, back from people. Yeah. Do you want to do your first set on here?
Come on then, let's give this a go. Let's see what happens.
1, slower, 3, that's it, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, easy, see?
Now that's the professional way of doing it, you see. That's 10, one more.
How can we use then, just on that, in terms of the buyer, if it's all about the buyer, the psychology of the buyer, how can we use psychology to understand our buyers better?
If you look at most of the methodologies that there are out there, one of the things that they talk about is, identifying pain, being able to uncover that. And if you look at something like a qualification framework like MEDPIC,
Yep.
and there's a difference between qualification frameworks and sales methodologies, but we'll stick to the framework for a second. One of the things they talk about is pain, identified pain, indicated pain, and then implicated pain. And it's the implicated pain is when it becomes an emotional connection. This is something that affects me as a buyer. It affects my metrics. It affects, it could be risk.
Yep.
It affects something fundamental about how I operate. Therefore, it's something I need to address. And it's interesting. So I've used that framework, the qualification framework of MEDPIC. But actually, if you look at other methodologies, so SPIN, for example, one of the things that they talk about is implicated pain. How do you imply pain? Likewise, if I look at something like Challenger, it's exactly the same. So all these methodologies have got all these commonalities about identifying, indicating, and implicating pain. It's all the same sort of thing. So to my mind, sometimes it doesn't really matter so much about the methodology that you're using. It's about, are you following the steps in a process to get you to where you need to?
Got it.
And a lot of that, again, whilst it may not be explicit about their psychology there, implicitly there is. And this is one of the reasons I would encourage people to, rather than just we do training about, here is a methodology, here is a framework, here is a sales play. Get behind it, understand why it works that way, because that actually makes, I think, you more effective as a seller.
Yes, that's a good point actually. Do you feel some teams or some leaders are implementing methodologies or playbooks and people are just following it without actually understanding why they're doing it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Whose fault is that? Is that the leader's fault or the reps themselves?
It's not about necessarily portioning blame, because, having sat in these roles before, there's a lot of time pressure. And sometimes you may understand the correct way of doing something, and you may understand why X or Y or Z is important, but you don't have the time to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a poor excuse, but I think that's just the reality of things. There's so much pressure on, we need performance, we need this, we need that, we need the other, that sometimes people can't see the wood for the trees. And I think a lot of that is driven, funnily enough, by quarterly targets and quarterly pressures, whereas one of the things that I'm a big advocate for is look at the bigger picture, Because if I focused on this quarter and I don't get my head out of this quarter, I can never focus on the quarter after or the year after or how we're going to grow over the next 3 years. And it's important to be able to do, I'm not saying sacrifice the quarter, but I'm saying you need to be able to divide your time and do both.
Got it.
And that's what I think a lot of people struggle with. And it is about discipline, you know. And this is why I think in a lot of structures, you know, you need to have people that are leaders of a function. It's not the same as being a team leader where you then are, you know, equipping, training, coaching your team so that they can be the best versions of themselves. This is about the strategy that you employ to make sure you're going after the right opportunities in the right markets that resonate with the product and the services that you sell, and that, you know, you're then able to drive real value for it, not just this quarter, but next quarter, the quarter after, and ongoing. That's where real value lies.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll ask you about the sales methodologies in a second, but I just want to get the next set in. Can you do more?
Sorry?
Can you do more?
I think we'll stick with what we got.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go 12. Nice.
Thank you.
Does it feel more comfortable as you do more?
It does actually, you get used to it.
Yeah, so there's no excuse you can't do more on the next set.
All right, okay, I see where this is going.
So yeah, just before I do my set, you mentioned there around there's methodologies and there's actually playbooks, I guess, with, I guess, because I think sometimes I've seen the debate before, is MEDIC or MEDPIC a methodology or is it a qualification process?
It's a qualification framework.
So why do people say, to me as a recruiter, we're looking for people who know sales methodologies such as MEDIC, MEDPIC?
Because they don't understand the difference.
Okay.
It's one of these things, MEDPIC is just the flavour of the month at the moment.
Okay.
Right?
I feel like it's been like that for a while.
It has. I mean, you know, it was PTC that first brought around that methodology. And this is like 20 years ago. And they were hugely successful with it. But again, it's because it's something that's easy to remember and easy to follow in terms of the acronym. Then you've got people like Andy White, great guy actually. You know, he's done a fantastic job of really bringing that to the fore and really bring it to life, particularly in the UK.
Yeah.
It's not as well adopted across the rest of Europe, but in the UK he's done a great job, and clearly in the US it's well understood. The qualification framework needs to work in tandem with a methodology, sales methodology. And like I say, there are many different frameworks. You could use 95-5, you can use SPIN, you can use command of the message, you can use Challenger. There are all sorts of things that are out there, but they all follow the basic same principles. And what I would say to anybody who's putting a methodology in place is you need to architect the methodology for your organization. So what I mean by that is, let's take something like Challenger.
Yep.
If I am selling a product or a service and it's at 5K a pop, how much do I need to challenge people to teach, tailor, and take control of a situation to make a 5K decision? It's very different to if I'm asking somebody to part with $500,000. And likewise, that applies to the methodologies as well. So, the frameworks as well. So something like MEDPIC. Do I need to go through every single stage of MEDPIC for a 5K deal, or am I over-engineering things and overcomplicating it? So you've got to make it fit for purpose. Because again, if I'm doing something that's, like I say, 5K with a 2-week sales cycle, why bother with the complication?
So what would you use if you would advise?
Well, you can just truncate it down. There are elements you might use, but you just wouldn't use the whole thing. You know, it's about picking the things that are right for you and your organization. Whereas if you're doing something like, you know, for example, when I used to work at HPE, the deals we were doing there were in the hundreds of millions. Now again, that methodology doesn't work because again, you've got literally hundreds of people involved in a deal, and there's multiple different conversations going on with different people in the organization. Actually, it's no longer about technology, it's more about how you're going to finance that deal.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different type of orchestration. So it depends where you are. Now, as it happens, in my last gig at Uberall, I mean, I did introduce Challenger and I did introduce MEDIC. And the reason for doing that is because the deal sizes we were doing were generally between sort of 20 to 50K, was more that sort of range. And there it becomes useful to do those things and have something that people can stick to, because At the end of the day, when you're scaling a business, you want to have a scalable, repeatable process that people find easy to follow.
Yeah.
And it also creates a nomenclature in the business. That means that if we're talking about, let's say, economic buyer, everybody knows what we mean by economic buyer. If we're talking about, the value proposition in terms of what value is it going to deliver to the customer, in terms of how we're going to teach, tailor, and take control of a situation, everybody knows what we're talking about. And that becomes really important, especially for things like when you are moving through a deal, or when you're doing a deal review, or if you're coaching, or if you're even doing things like a forecast. It helps you understand where you are in a particular deal.
Yeah, okay.
And everybody's using the same language.
Yeah, I guess the message then is it's business to business, right?
Yes.
Different types of sales. I imagine, I'm going to say maybe it's suited to different products, but each product costs different prices. So I guess it is down to the product you're selling, the deal's value, who's involved within the deal.
And the cycle as well, because again, where it tends to work optimally, I find, is where you've got a deal cycle in terms of the real deal, not in terms of, you've got a prospect that maybe got identified 6 months ago before they actually start speaking to a rep. But in the actual deal itself, when you're sort of, I guess, between 2 to 6 months as a sales cycle, that's where I think has the most impact. There will be others where, you're going to a year and so on, but where you're going to deals like, if you're doing something, let's say in aerospace and defense, it's a completely different deal cycle. You might be on a 2 to 3 year deal cycle on those kind of things. But then, like I say, it might be, 100, 200, 300 million that you're doing. It's very different, so it's got to be appropriate to the organization.
Got it, makes sense. My set?
Go on. 1,
You're doing this next.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What happened to slowing it down? That was your advice to me.
Well, that's more of when you haven't done it before. So which are your most commonly used frameworks, qualification process, methodologies, or favorites? Do you have any favorites?
I do. I do quite like Medic,
Yeah.
and I do quite like Challenger. But that's not to say that others aren't, others aren't appropriate. I think it's been because of the kind of businesses that I've been in that they are best suited to it. Because generally the deal sizes that I've been involved with, certainly for the last 10 years, have majority been sort of between 50 and 200K.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of where they land, and that works really well for that.
Okay.
So that's why I would tend towards those.
Fair.
But it's not to say that others don't work. And it's one of these things, I think it also has to be, as a leader, where you are comfortable as well.
What, in terms of your knowledge of
Your knowledge of it. Because not everybody's familiar with every single framework, not everybody's familiar with every single sales methodology, and they don't need to be. It's what's appropriate for your proposition, what's appropriate for your market, what's appropriate for you as well as a leader.
Well, I imagine you get leaders coming in who aren't fully aware of the qualification process or framework, and they're trying to implement it within a team, but then if they don't really know it, how can they implement it?
I think there's a little bit of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because again, I'm a great believer in if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if there's already a methodology in place and it's well adopted and well used, don't change it. Because otherwise the stress that you put the entire organization under, then it's up to the leader to familiarize themselves with it, rather than going, actually, I'm not familiar with it, I'm going to do this thing over here. That's incumbent. And again, I've seen recently there's a big uptake of things like command of the message.
Yes.
Again, if you're not familiar with it, get familiar with it. Because if that's already been implemented, no point redoing it, because people have got to relearn, and that takes forever.
Yeah, okay. Looks up.
Let's do it.
1. Too easy. 3, 4, 5, just a bit further forward. Right, yeah, that's it. You got 2 more. Yeah. See?
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Come on. That's how you do it.
So before we go into one-arm rows, Louis, I want to speak about, so you spoke about the psychology of sales, let's speak about the psychology of management. You spoke about 3 pillars, which were train, equip, The last one was
It's equip, train, coach,
equip, train, coach. So
in that order.
in that order.
And actually, this is something that actually High Spots have done a great job of establishing that as a way of working from a sales enablement point of view, as a framework. And actually, a very good friend of mine, who I think you were probably going to interview, Andy Champion, he's the one that sort of inspired me with that kind of framework. It's a very simple framework. I really like it because the first thing you need to do with any team, doesn't matter whether it's a sales team or whatever, is you need to provide them with the proper equipment. Have they got the right circumstances, the right things in their kit bag to be able to do the job? That includes sales methodologies, frameworks, sales plays, battle cards, all those kind of things. Everything we can do to make their lives easier. Is the right technology in place to help aid and abet them to do things? And once that's all in place, when you then bring them into an organization, you do your initial training. Now, I think the challenge with a lot of organizations is that things are moving so quickly, they don't devote enough time to that training. You turn up in that remote environment, you get on a Zoom call, you get a morning's worth, welcome to the company, here's your laptop, this is how the IT stuff works. There's some online training, good luck, knock yourself out. And unfortunately, I can't remember who said the stat, but basically I think it's something like about 95% of all training that is done is forgotten within 3 months. So unless you do the training, you repeat the training and repetition, and then you coach. And coaching and training are very, very different. The skill sets are completely different. Training is about telling somebody, you may have come across this as well from a professional sports perspective, I don't know. There are 4 ways in which you learn. There's unconscious incompetent. I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to do it. There's conscious incompetent. I still don't know what I'm doing. I know what I should be doing, but I still don't know quite how to do it. Then there's conscious competent. I know what I'm doing, I have to think about what I'm doing and I can do it. And then there's unconscious competent. It's muscle memory. And the whole point is you need to take people on that journey so that it becomes muscle memory. I don't have to think about doing something, it's just second nature. And that takes time. And there's a great phrase, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later as well. And it talks to, people who want to be great in their discipline, they don't practice until they get it right. They practice until they never get it wrong. And there's a subtle difference in the psychology of that even. I practice until I get it right every time and I don't have to think about it. And this is what people like Dave Beresford was talking about, it's the marginal gains. How do we get into, really understanding this and repeat. And all the great athletes that are out there, you only have to look at people like somebody like Roger Federer. He doesn't play a forehand once. He's played that same forehand, tens of thousands of times. It's the same thing. You have to build that up. If you do things differently every single time, you'll never build up that memory. And it's a bit like training, like what we're doing here now. It's all very well, I come into the gym and I spend 20 minutes or whatever doing whatever it is with you. It doesn't make me a professional at all, right? It means I'm a hobbyist, right? But if I was doing this seriously every single day of the week, 2 hours of training every single day, do you know what? I'd get very good at it. I'd get the right forms, I'd be able to, do the moves correctly, whatever it is, I would learn. And that's how you get into being a top athlete. That's how you get into being a top sales professional.
Yeah, I love that. So it's that repeated training. Because I think, hold my hands up as a leader myself, is we may run a training session and the session's great. Everyone's bouncing off each other and trying new ideas. Yeah, let's go implement it. But then we never come back to it because maybe time or it's hard to, that energy we had in the training session itself, we can't replicate it again. So then it's kind of forgotten. And then you say after 3 months, it's probably gone out the window, hasn't it?
And then you've got to start all over again.
Start all over again.
But this is where it then becomes incumbent on people to coach to that training. So this is where, and I said I like the idea of technology coming in to help with that psychology of management and that psychology of selling, where you then can turn around and say, we've learned something, let's go back over a call recording. We've got the conversational intelligence. And what people then have got a tendency to do when they think they're coaching is saying, well, that was wrong, and that was wrong. This is how I would have done it differently. That's not coaching.
Okay.
So how do you think that might have been handled differently. And it goes back to this whole idea of if I tell you to do something, I own it and I'm imposing it on you. If I ask you how you might do something different and coach you to a different outcome, you own it, and you're much more likely to adopt it because now it's your idea, it's your habit that you're creating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And that's part of that psychology of leadership.
Yeah.
You know, there's no point imposing things on people. It doesn't work. It's co-creation, absolutely. It's guidance, absolutely. And it's coaching. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of organizations miss out on because they don't spend enough time, you know, on the coaching. There's an outfit called My Sales Coach.
Yeah, I've heard of them, yeah.
Right. They've just released a paper actually talking about the amount of coaching that people say they give and the reality that AEs have. And it makes for quite interesting reading. You should have a look at it.
I'll take a look.
It's the perception that leaders sometimes have about how much coaching they do, and they think it's like things like one-to-ones, not necessarily a coaching session because it ends up being a pipeline review or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's that versus the actuality of, as an AE, how much coaching do I really feel I've had? And it's something I'm really passionate about. And it goes back to the sort of skiing and sailing thing because that's where I kind of learned those habits.
Yeah, of course. You have to send me that paper.
Yeah, sure.
First set,
Yeah, let's go.
back pump. Should do 10 reps.
Six, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right, so going back to the reps themselves then, so, or as a leader, it's not telling them, it's getting them to figure out why. Or
Coaching them to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about something you spoke about before is the motivations of your team?
Yeah.
Making sure that they're doing it for their motivations rather than your motivations. Is that right?
Yes, because at the end of the day, you know, I think one of the things you've got to be as a leader again is you've got, it's no longer about you. Okay, it isn't. As an individual contributor, you're thinking about like, you know, how much commission am I going to make? When's my promotion going to come? Da 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 da. There's all things going on. How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I doing it? Those are your personal things. Now, as a leader, you may have some of those same things,
Yeah.
but nobody cares. What you need to be focused on is how do I help my team be great? How do I turn them into the best versions of themselves? How do I support them as best I can? How do I get rid of roadblocks? That's what it's about. And the other thing as well is you've got to be quite careful, I think, as a leader, because there are different kinds of energies. You've got your physical energy, mental energy, your emotional energy, and your spiritual energy, whatever that might mean to each individual, right? When you show up to your team, consistency in all of those is really important. If you're having a bad day and you cast a big shadow because of that, and you're in a foul mood, it's going to rub off on your team. So you can have all sorts of things going on in your personal life or whatever, you can't bring it to the table because that's not going to be good for your team. You've got to be consistent. And one of the big things as a leader is that consistency. So that people know what to expect from you. They know how you're going to react. They know what's going to motivate you, and they know what they can come to you for on a support basis. And that is half the battle won.
Yeah. I think it's something that I'm trying to, I mean, how often would you, obviously everybody sets goals and you encourage your team to set goals. If we set goals at the beginning of the quarter or beginning of the month and they have personal goals, how often do you bring these up and how often do you check in with them as a leader?
So there are different types of check-ins. So, you know, doing a pipeline review is not the same as doing a one-to-one, right? So they're separate things. Doing a deal review is not the same as doing a coaching session. Reviewing a deal and coaching at the same time doesn't generally work. You might have a coaching moment in those kind of things, but it's not the same thing. So understanding that there are different reasons for having meetings and what the purpose of those meetings are is really vitally important. So I wouldn't mix those things. I would try not to. There might be opportunities to coach in the moment, great.
Yeah.
But again, separate those things out. Because sometimes it could be on a one-to-one, you're saying, okay, so tell me what's going on with you. What are your concerns? And it doesn't necessarily have to be work-related. It could be, I've got concern about X or Y or Z. These are things that might affect somebody's ability to work. And how can I help you with those? It may be that you can't, but even by talking about it could be helpful. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that every sales leader should suddenly become a psychologist. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just to be mindful of, you know, the things that affect other people's lives. Because everybody's fighting a battle that you know nothing about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's just to be mindful of those things and try and support people as best you can.
Yeah. Okay, next step.
Next. Right.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I was going to ask you about the your team making mistakes. One of the things I wouldn't say I'm struggling with it. It's just an adaptation of becoming a leader, and from being IC and now leading people.
Yeah.
It's if I see someone doing something wrong, it's like, oh, stop! I want to jump in. But I'm learning that you have to allow your team to make mistakes. So why do you think that's important as a new leader or just a leader in general?
It's no different to having kids, actually. If you never allow them to make mistakes, they're never going to learn. My dad always used to say, the only way you learn is by banging your head against a wall, right? Yeah. And it's true. If you think about it in the parent-child dynamic, if you were my child, I could tell you, don't do that because this is what the consequence will be. You'll turn around and go, what do you know? And you'll rebel against it. You have to find out for yourself.
Sure.
Even though my experience might tell me I know what the outcome of that's going to be.
Yeah.
But no, I need to find that out for myself. If as a leader you constantly intervene, nobody's ever going to learn. So the idea is you start people off in a safe environment. If I have a new rep and I immediately put them in front of the biggest deal in my pipeline, that's just silly.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what they're like. They don't know how the company works. They haven't learned anything really yet. Mm-hmm. So you start them small. Get a few things under the belt. Whereas if they get it wrong, it's no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
But that's on you as a leader to gauge that. And if they do get things wrong, the temptation I know is overwhelming to jump in. It'll just let it happen and then unpack it afterwards. And this is where I think actually it becomes really important actually, because frontline managers in organizations are some of the most underserved people in those organizations. And what I mean by that is typically you've been a great IC, you've smashed your number, I want a promotion. Get promoted to a sales manager, first time being a sales manager, congratulations, Niall, you've made it, you're a sales manager, off you go.
Yeah.
And there's no training at all. You're expected to know what to do. So the default position then becomes, okay, I remember what I used to do to be successful. I need to replicate that, except now I have 6-line reports. So what I do is I come in, I swoop in to all of these opportunities that they're all running, and I end up rescuing these deals as they're in flight because I know best. And the limiting factor becomes me then, because I'm the one actually running the deals, not the AEs. And there's only so much of me to go around. Meanwhile, they're not learning anything. They're not feeling fulfilled. How's that scalable?
Yeah.
So one of the things I think it's incumbent on people like VPs and CROs to do is to ensure that they're supporting their frontline managers so that they then acquire the skills, because the skill sets for being an IC and the skill sets for being a leader are slightly different. Yes, there's some stuff that's transferable, absolutely. But again, it's partly about how do I scale myself to be able to support my team? Because remember, it's no longer about me, it's about them. So that's when I think there's a real opportunity for organizations to really double down on how they support those frontline managers, so that they in turn can properly support their teams. And that's how you get to things like, you know, one of the biggest challenges at the moment in all SaaS sales particularly is productivity. The way to get to productivity is to make people more effective and more efficient. The way you do that is by equipping, training, and coaching. It's not actually that complicated, but it's quite difficult to do.
Yeah, well, I think how do we, all right, so how do we allow businesses to do that in moments of growth? How do we stop, or how does a leader stop and learn these areas of leadership, I guess, when you've got all these things happening, all these deals to close, all these targets to hit? How would you implement all of this?
So this is where, as a VP or a CRO, it's your job then to protect your team, as in the line managers, from a lot of that stuff that's coming down. So I will give you the things that you need to be aware of, but you don't need to have the entire flood of things. If you're not acting as a gatekeeper in some respects for everything coming downstream, then again, you're not protecting your team.
Yeah, okay.
And giving them the space to be able to do things. If I'm like, right, okay, today we've got a forecast call, where's this deal, where's that deal, da 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 da. And I've seen that style of management, certainly in some of the larger software vendors, maybe 10 years ago, but that was, managing by fear and managing by spreadsheet doesn't actually work. Whereas actually, if I'm there to coach you and give you those hints and tips and tricks, but equally help you work it out yourself, over time you're going to be much more effective. And the biggest thing is to resist the urge to say we've got to focus purely on this quarter and just deliver the quarter and then worry about things later, because it'll be tomorrow, 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 and tomorrow never comes.
Okay. Let me do my last set.
Yep. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So Louis, before we do the bicep curls, I want to ask you about the sales self-development.
Yep.
So when we spoke on Zoom, you had this big stack of books. First of all, why is it so important, you think, for leaders, anyone in sales, anyone in general really, to self-develop? You're obviously massive on it.
Yeah. So if you as an individual can't be bothered to take responsibility for your own development, why should anybody else? That's a basic philosophy. And there's some great talks, actually. One of my personal heroes is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I don't know if you've read or listened to his book. It is fantastic, but it's basically about taking personal responsibility for your own success, right? And nobody's going to hand it to you on a plate, so go out there and get it. And one of the things he talks about is how you break down your day. You know, how you maybe spend time on training, how you maybe spend time on work, how you spend time on sleep, all those kind of things. Spending an hour a day on self-development. Doesn't have to be anything to do with your job, but just spend it on, your mental agility. Vitally important. So the people I am more inclined to help, the people I am more inclined to support, the people that I am more inclined to coach are the ones that can be bothered to take some personal responsibility themselves, because I want to help them. If you want it, I want you to want it.
Yeah.
So I think that's vitally important, and I'm a great believer in that.
Yeah, it's something that when I'm hiring, it's something I look for. I've only hired sort of junior people so far, but you see those traits, whether it's something they do in sport or podcasts they listen to or books they've read. You can see those, even if they are still young, they see those traits, don't you, from early on.
And it's about, one of the things I look for whenever I'm hiring, well, there's two things really. One is curiosity. Are you curious? Are you going to bother to find stuff out? And the other one then is just around overall attitude. Are you prepared to go the extra mile? Are you prepared to show up? Are you prepared to be ready? One of the things I remember, a very early boss of mine, this is like 30, 35 years ago, said to me, he told me about the 7 Ps. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And that's stuck with me because it's very simple to remember. And the other thing that he said was, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. Very simple little things, and they're a bit pithy, but there's a lot of truth in that. So sort yourself out, get yourself prepared, get ready, invest in yourself.
Love that.
Because if you don't invest in yourself, why should I?
Yeah, I love that. Well, speaking of Arnold Schwarzenegger, we've got some guns to build.
There we go.
You go first.
Right, let's do this.
Back nice and straight, and just that's it. Get all the way down, get a stretch on the bottom, at the bottom. Yeah. Nice, Louis. 12?
Yep.
Why not?
See, that's what proper guns look like.
Okay, so if you had to say the five best books for leadership, what would those be?
So if it's for things like coaching and leadership,
Yes.
yeah, okay. So the first one, A Seaman's Guide to the Rules of the Road,
That's one.
right? And the reason for that is we've talked about repetition. It's by the Royal Navy and it is fantastic. It tells you how to navigate things and it's repetition, repetition, repetition. And that's the lesson from that. And I love that. The next one then is Sir John Whitmore's Coaching for Performance. It's been around for about 20, 25 years. And actually it's taking some sporting concepts and transferring them to business. Brilliant. Then two great books, and it's by the same author, is Good to Great and Built to Last by Jim Collins. Mm-hmm. And what I love about those books is that it's all built on data. It's nobody's opinion. It's lots and lots and lots of research about what helps companies go from good to great and what helps companies go maintain that greatness and are built to last. It's very, very good required reading, I think, for anybody in business. And then the last one is probably Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Yeah. You know, again, it just teaches you about humility and teaches you about being in there with your team. And you know, I think it's just a great follow-on to things like Start With Why.
Okay. So that's for leadership, coaching, training. If I'm might be an IC, might be a leader. Mm-hmm. Top 5 books for sales development.
Right. So Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play by Maham and Khalsa and Randy Illig. Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic book, and they did that probably in the year, I want to say about 2000, so it's quite dated now, but it's fantastic. Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. Mm-hmm. And again, there's some great foundational stuff in there. And then actually 3 books by the same guy.
I know you're going to.
Yeah, it's going to be Challenger Sale, Challenger Customer, and The Jolt Effect. Matt Dixon. Yeah. And they are fantastic. Again, all of those books, without fail, are built not on opinions. They are built on meticulous research, hundreds of thousands of sales calls, and what's true about all of those all the way through. Mm-hmm. So you can choose to ignore it, it's up to you, but actually that's the secret sauce, the formula, and they're great.
Brilliant. Well, those are the books everyone needs to go and get. Cool. Well, let's wrap the weight lifted up and let's go into a bit of a get a sweat on.
Sure.
Right, Louis. So we've got the back. We've got chest, back, and bicep and shoulder pump.
Right.
Now it's time to get a whole body pump. So this is just the assault bike. You said you haven't used one before, but similar to some of the stuff you've used. We're going to go 20 seconds on as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. 10-second rest. 20 seconds as hard as you can. 10-second rest. And we're going to do that 8 times.
8 times.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'm so looking forward to this. 2, 1.
Cool. You got some more energy left, Louis?
Just about.
So,
just about.
As everyone, as you saw from the other episodes, you've got a 30-second max cal ski. But I reckon you've got at least, being an ex-skier, I reckon you've got at least 13 calories in you.
Yeah, ex-skier.
So I want you to pull as hard as you can. Get a nice stretch at the top if you can. 30 seconds as hard as you can. Ready?
Go on, let's do this.
3, 2, 1, go. Yes, Louis, come on. Stretch at the top if you can a bit more. Pull, keep pulling. You've got 15 seconds on. You're on 5 calories, come on. 6 calories, 10 seconds, everything you've got now, come on. Everything you've got. Come on, Louis. 8, get to 10, come on, get to 10. Get to 10. And stop there. 9 calories.
There we go.
That was good.
Yeah.
Good session?
Yeah, no, good.
Yeah. No, you did really well. I'm really interested. That was a bit of a leadership masterclass for me, that. I
thank
take
you.
a lot of that and implement it. And I also want to say I spoke to one of your old reps recently and I asked him who the best manager there was, and he said yourself. So
Oh, that's very sweet of him.
really happy to get you on.
I'll have to give him a tenner later.
I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you.
It's really good to meet you. Thank you for that. So I really enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Cheers.